They called it the Shadow Gate. A relic of forgotten times, it was hidden deep within the forest of Blackthorn Hollow, shrouded in perpetual mist and eerie silence. The gate, a towering arch of ancient stone, was said to pulse with an otherworldly energy on moonless nights. Locals warned against venturing into the forest, whispering tales of those who entered but never returned. Skeptical yet intrigued, I set out to uncover the truth behind the legends. Armed with a flashlight, a notebook, and an unshakable curiosity, I stepped into the forest one fateful evening, the air thick with tension and foreboding. The forest seemed alive, its gnarled trees forming skeletal silhouettes against the darkened sky. Every step I took felt like an intrusion into a forbidden realm. The wind whispered through the branches, carrying voices I couldn't quite discern. My flashlight beam flickered, revealing glimpses of strange carvings on the trees, symbols that seemed both ancient and sinister. As I pressed on, the path became less defined, the undergrowth thicker, as if the forest itself was trying to deter me from going further. After what felt like hours of walking, I stumbled upon a clearing. There it stood, the Shadow Gate, more imposing than I had imagined. The arch was made of an unidentifiable black stone, its surface covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shift and writhe under the flashlight's beam. At the base of the gate, faintly glowing runes pulsed in an unnerving rhythm, casting flickering shadows across the clearing. The air around the gate was heavy, charged with an inexplicable energy that made my skin crawl. As I approached the gate, an overwhelming sense of dread washed over me. My instincts screamed to turn back, but my curiosity outweighed my fear. I crouched down to examine the glowing runes, tracing their patterns with my fingers. They felt warm, almost alive, and the moment I touched them, a low hum resonated through the air. The gate's carvings began to glow faintly, as if reacting to my presence. I quickly withdrew my hand, heart pounding, but it was too late. Something had been triggered. A sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, extinguishing my flashlight. I fumbled to turn it back on, but the beam refused to light. The clearing was plunged into darkness, save for the faint glow of the runes. Then I heard it. A faint whisper, growing louder and more insistent. The words were indecipherable, but they carried an undeniable malice. My breath quickened as shadows began to coalesce around the gate, taking on forms that seemed almost human. Paralyzed with fear, I watched as the shadows moved closer, their shapes shifting and morphing. They whispered in unison now, their voices melding into a haunting chorus. "Join us," they seemed to say, though I couldn't be sure. My instincts finally took over, and I stumbled backward, my foot catching on a root. As I hit the ground, a sharp pain shot through my ankle, but I forced myself to crawl away. The shadows didn't pursue. Instead, they lingered by the gate as if bound to it. Desperation overtook me as I tried to make sense of what was happening. The legends had spoken of disappearances, but they hadn't mentioned anything like this. I pulled out my notebook, scribbling down what I had seen in shaky handwriting. The act of writing felt grounding, a way to anchor myself in reality. But even as I wrote, the whispers continued, their tone growing more insistent, almost pleading. The shadows seemed to reach toward me, their forms stretching unnaturally. Suddenly, the ground beneath the gate began to tremble. The rune's glow intensified, bathing the clearing in an eerie light. A portal began to form within the arch, its surface swirling like liquid darkness. From within, a chilling cold emanated, and the whispers became deafening. I stared in horrified fascination as a hand, pale, elongated, and inhuman, emerged from the portal. It grasped the edge of the gate, its nails digging into the stone with a sound that made my skin crawl. instinct screamed at me to run, but my body refused to obey. I was transfixed, unable to tear my eyes away from the portal. More of the figure emerged, its form impossibly tall and gaunt, its eyes glowing with a sickly green light. It didn't speak, but its presence conveyed an overwhelming sense of malice. The shadows around the gate seemed to bow to it, as if acknowledging their master. I finally found the strength to move, scrambling to my feet and backing away slowly. As I turned to flee, the entity's gaze locked onto me. A voice, deep, resonant, and filled with venom, echoed in my mind. "You should not have come," it said. The ground shook violently, and I lost my footing again. The portal began to collapse in on itself, the light dimming, and the shadows retreating. The last thing I saw before darkness enveloped the clearing was the entity's outstretched hand, reaching toward me as if trying to pull me back. I stumbled through the forest, my heart racing and my breaths ragged. The path I had taken to the clearing seemed to twist and warp, as if the forest itself was conspiring against me. The whispers followed, faint but persistent, growing louder whenever I slowed. Branches clawed at my arms and face, and the ground seemed to shift beneath my feet, making every step a struggle. Panic set in as I realized I was completely lost. The shadows weren't bound to the gate anymore. I could feel them, lurking just beyond the edge of my vision, flitting between the trees like predators stalking their prey. My flashlight flickered back to life, its beam weak and erratic, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Each time I turned to look, I saw nothing, but the sensation of being watched was undeniable. Exhausted and desperate, I stumbled into a small cave, its entrance obscured by overgrown vines. The air inside was damp and stale, but it offered a temporary refuge. I collapsed against the rough stone wall, clutching my notebook like a talisman. As I tried to collect my thoughts, the whispers grew fainter, replaced by an oppressive silence. It was almost worse than the noise, as if the shadows were waiting for me to let my guard down. In the dim light of my flickering flashlight, I noticed something etched into the cave walls. Symbols similar to those on the shadow gate covered the stone, their patterns more chaotic and unsettling. Among the symbols were crude drawings, figures standing before the gate, their forms distorted and their faces featureless. One image, larger than the rest, depicted a figure stepping through the gate, surrounded by tendrils of darkness. A sudden chill swept through the cave, and the flashlight flickered violently before going out completely. I was plunged into darkness, the air growing colder with each passing second. My breaths came in shallow gasps as a new sound emerged, a deep, guttural growl that seemed to come from all around me. The walls felt like they were closing in, the cave shrinking with each heartbeat. I fumbled for my flashlight, but my trembling hands couldn't find it. Then, I saw it, two glowing green eyes piercing through the darkness. They were identical to the entity's eyes at the gate, but this time, they were closer, more focused. The growling intensified, reverberating through my chest, and the air became suffocating. I pressed myself against the wall, praying that whatever it was wouldn't come closer. But the eyes didn't waver, and I knew escape was impossible. In a final act of desperation, I reached into my bag and pulled out the notebook. I held it up like a shield, shouting incoherent words into the void. To my astonishment, the growling ceased, and the eyes blinked out of existence. The oppressive weight in the air lifted slightly, and a faint light returned to the cave. I opened the notebook, and for the first time, I noticed something I hadn't written. A warning scrawled in jagged handwriting. The gate demands a sacrifice. The words sent a chill down my spine. I didn't know how they had appeared, But the implication was clear. The forest, the shadows, the entity, they wouldn't let me leave without a price. My mind raced as I tried to think of a way out. The cave grew darker once more, and the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. They weren't asking me to join them anymore. They were demanding it. Summoning every ounce of courage, I tore a page from the notebook and set it alight with a match from my bag. The flames illuminated the cave, and for a brief moment I saw the shadows recoiling, their forms writhing in agony. The growling returned, but it was weaker now, almost pained. I seized the opportunity and ran, not caring which direction I was heading. All I knew was that I had to get as far away as possible. When I finally emerged from the forest, the first rays of dawn were breaking over the horizon. I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air, my body trembling with exhaustion and fear. The whispers had stopped, and the oppressive weight was gone, but the memory of the gate and its horrors remained etched into my mind. As I looked back at the forest, I realized the Shadow Gate wasn't just a legend. It was a warning, one I had foolishly ignored. And though I had escaped, I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest wasn't done with me yet.